Chaos Hero Nightmare is one of the most promising new roguelike deck builders, but right now, there's one major design problem that's hurting its replayability. And the really frustrating part is that Slay the Spire has actually solved this years ago. And this one problem is really the only thing that's preventing CZN from being as endlessly replayable as Slay the Spire. So let's jump into it. So my main problem with Chaos Hero Nightmare is the way the epiphany system works, or rather how the epiphanies are made in the first place. Something every player can relate to is going into a chaos run and looking to get that good save data for the one character that you want, but ultimately just being really left frustrated. And I think the problem basically boils down to this, which is most characters are funneled into one specific build or combo of cards, and that build pretty much outperforms all the other options. So for example, you can think about Mei Lin's Epiphany on her Unity of Attack and Defense card, which basically lets her move her basics into her hand instead of drawing them from the draw pile. And then you also have that combo with the Spire card where you get an additional hit with each Passion card played during the turn, and then you can really go crazy. And I would say this is like the gold standard for Mei Lin, and pretty much everyone is aiming for this particular build. It's just, it outperforms everything. And then you can also look at Hugo as another example, and he hates losing that Initiation, or previously called Outbreak of War, tag on his Hunting Instincts card. And I feel like this creates a really unhealthy gameplay loop, where instead of adapting to what we get on the fly, we kind of all fish for like that one perfect epiphany. And if it doesn't appear, we reset the run, we try again, and it kind of makes it start to feel like a chore, and each run just feels less fun overall. And then this is where the Slay the Spire comparison comes in. I've recently been grinding the game after almost a year of not playing, and I was just reminded of how well Slay the Spire has balanced their cards and their characters overall. Ultimately, I feel like Slay the Spire builds work because there's just tons of variety for each character, and there's a lot of synergies spread across many cards. And it's not just that there's different builds too, it's really that almost any build can realistically win a run. So to start, there's only 4 characters in Slay the Spire. There's Ironclad, Silent, Watcher, and Defect, and you'd think that Chaos Hero Nightmare would have the advantage because in the game right now, as of this video, there's 23 characters. Well, honestly, I feel like Slay the Spire has such a fun diversity of builds that can beat the hard at Ascension 20, which is basically the hardest difficulty, that it feels way more replayable and fresh to me compared to Chaos Hero Nightmare. For example, if you're playing with the Silent, you can go with like a physical Shiv build with lots of blade dances and accuracies. You can also fully spec into poison builds with cards like Bouncing Flask and Catalyst, or you can tap into the Silence discard engine to activate some cool combos with cards such as Tactician and Eviscerate. For the Ironclad, it's pretty similar. You can do like a strength build with stuff like Spot Weakness and Limit Break. You can go crazy defensive with Barricade and Entrench paired up with a Body Slam, or you can just go crazy with exhaust energies like Second Wind and Feel No Pain. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that you can mix and match all these different playstyles for each character. You can make a ton of fresh decks, and all of these options have a chance of beating the game. You always pretty much go with the flow and adapt to the cards that are offered to you. And me personally, I never reset a run. I always just want to see how far I can push my deck in each run. While Slay the Spire definitely handles build diversity better than Chaos Hero Nightmare, I think this can change and Chaos Hero Nightmare could fully tap into its potential. And here's how. The main thing the devs need to do is to rework or buff certain epiphanies. And actually, the devs recently announced that they're gonna buff Yuki and give her some epiphanies that would help her spec into more of a single target build instead of just the usual AoE build that we've been running. And this is good, but they only really did this because of the community backlash on how bad Yuki was, and they haven't announced changing any other characters. But regardless, my point with this is that they can buff the characters' epiphanies, and it is something that is a viable option. So the epiphanies, I think, should be more interesting and less all for nothing. Instead of always having one option be better than the others, they should make some epiphanies more interesting to explore. I basically say this because I don't want to argue that everything should be equally as strong, because I feel like no matter how many epiphanies you would change on a character, there's always going to end up being that one optimal build. But with that being said, they can still definitely add variety in a way that makes some builds better in certain contexts and worse than others. And they can also try to make all of them fun. So one way of doing this would be to open up a way for characters to either do something they can't do with their optimal build, or make some epiphanies synergize with the epiphanies of some other characters. This would basically broaden synergies and allow us to test different combinations. So going back to that Mei Lin Unity card as an example, instead of only enabling that optimal combo where you're moving your basics back to your hand and then doing big damage with the Spire card, you could make it open up an entire differently playstyle. For example, what if for that epiphany, instead of drawing 2 of her basics, she drew 1 basic and then 1 card from another combatant. Then you could pair her up with someone like Yuki and draw a Yuki card, activate the inspiration on it, and that would just be a really cool synergy overall. And if that's too broken by both drawing a Mei Lin basic and another card, you could just turn it into some kind of draw card in general where she's supporting the team instead of being the main DPS. But then again, I'm not a game dev, so I don't know if this is the best example, but it's just to illustrate the point basically. This would just make the game more fun in general. No longer will you always have to reset all the time when you don't get what you want. And it would also make each Chaos run way more interesting. And while you might start out the Chaos run with a certain build in mind, you could end up getting an alternative epiphany that changes the build. And you can actually make a new build in a new direction that could synergize with something else on your account. And this would turn Chaos into what feels like this frustrating chore at the moment, into something that we actually look forward to doing. So basically, to recap, I think the main problem with CZN is the lack of build diversity for a lot of characters. The community gravitates towards the optimal build, and we're stuck resetting Chaos just to get that build. We're pretty much at the subject of RNG. But Slay the Spire has solved this problem perfectly because each character can run a wide variety of builds that are all viable and can make you beat the game in an interesting way. Of course, there's still builds that are stronger than others, but pretty much all of them are fun and can beat the game. So basically, to solve the problem, CZN doesn't need a full rework, it just needs epiphanies that push creativity instead of forcing a single meta. And Slay the Spire proved how powerful that design philosophy is. And if CZN can embrace it, it could become the next big roguelike deck builder that's just endlessly replayable. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video at all, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, it really helps out a ton. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.